Hello, my name is Jonathan Weiner.
I'm Enrique Gonzalez-Mueller.
Welcome to episode 4 of Are You Listening? The Mixing Series.
We'll be diving into panning and EQ, spatial distribution, frequency distribution. Why would we choose to keep something in the center, to the left, to the right? Why would we EQ something low in the mids and the highs, and figuring out the best strategies to get the most out of your music?
Don't forget to subscribe to the iZotope YouTube channel to be reminded about future episodes of Are You Listening and other videos from iZotope. So, before we start diving into the specifics, are there certain instruments that you never pan off-center?
I'm going to get a little artistic on you, but to me, there are no rules.
Yeah.
Really. I think the gut reaction for the 5-minute, hey guys, YouTube videos are you do this and you don't do this to get a fat sound.
Yeah.
And to me, immediately I'm thinking of the last thing that I mixed for Victor Wooten and Dennis Chambers, had the drums pan in the middle of the song all the way to the right, and Victor's bass, which turned into a Hammond B3, was panned opposite to the other side.
Yeah.
Go to jail now because you didn't know, So as we've covered before, I'd like to share concepts. Not specifically, this is how you do it, but rather concepts for you guys to try in your own work. I'm going to exemplify with a production that I did. Actually, it's maybe a couple years old, from a band called Los Amigos Invisibles. This band and I go way back in time. I used to be their fan when I was maybe 16 or so.
Nice.
And this was the follow-up that we did to a Grammy nomination we had. I love these guys. And they give me a lot of free creative reign to do a bunch of stuff. So we will be deconstructing this mix. So the mix is already done, and we're going to be muting things and seeing why these decisions were made. To kind of get our dip our feet in there, let's just take a listen through the first chorus so that everybody can hear what the vibe is, and then we're going to pull it apart. Here we go.
Cuando estoy tan cerquita de ti, algo por dentro se mueve lento. Si me preguntas qué te puedo decir, no me concentro con tu movimiento. Vuelo tan alto que me lleva el viento y anhelo tus besos. Soplas el fuego que llama este encuentro, lo que ya no puedo resistir. Tú me das something y esto me da something, algo que yo quiero y se siente bello. Tú me das something y esto me da something, y esta noche quiero repetir. Tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, oh. Tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, oh. Tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das.
Why would you pan one thing to the left or to the right? Is it a musical consideration? Is it a technical consideration? So let's just jump in and go down the line. So from our mixed organization conversation we had, you remember that I organized things in order of the most important and foundational to the bottom, right? So if I uncover the kick first, and then the snares, at some point, I uncover the hi-hat. Where am I going to pan the hi-hat to? It sounds like an easy thing. You could pan it that way or that way. Yes, but why? So I pan it to the left. Why? Because as we've covered, I love to air drum. And the drummer for this band is totally cool with air drumming to this as well. So this is easy enough, but the thing is not nilly-willy why I want to do this, but rather then the ripple effect of potential problems that this one little gesture does. Because, for example, let's say that the hi-hat is on the left and the crash is on the right. Well, then this is going to create a potential issue if you have tambourines and shakers that then where are you going to put? Well, you're maybe not going to put them where the right is, et cetera, et cetera.
The point of this is if you have things that occupy a similar voice or part of the spectrum using techno speak, if we separate them, it makes it easier to place them and hear them in the mix also.
Most definitely.
Right? I mean, so this is part of what's motivating you to even have this thought.
So we have kick, snare, hi-hat, we panned it to the left. Now my next thought immediately is, what other instruments occupy a similar frequency footprint? And those to me, if we just go down the list here, and I can tell you because I produced this track, are these two right here. One is a triangle, and the other one is a charrasca. So focusing in on the chorus, this is what they sound like. This is the triangle. And this is the charrasca. So you see that I pan them opposite to each other. But why did I pan the triangle to the left and the charrasca to the right? I know that I already panned my drums with the hi-hat to the left. If I listen to these very like sounding instruments, look at the pattern of the triangle, literally the rhythmic pattern of it. And here we go. It's an upbeat. What is the hi-hat playing? The hi-hat is playing mainly focused on the downbeats and its eighth notes. Right? How about the charrasca? Check it out. It's downbeats mostly. So then I want to achieve symmetry with three things. So I have on this side, I have Chances are, if I pan the two things that are not happening at once, I might have better luck at listening to them. That's the reason why the triangle is panned to the left and the charrasca is panned to the right. Just for kicks, let's reverse them. To see how this decision of spatial distribution then masks or not the sounds and what the repercussions then are when you start thinking of how you would EQ something. So I'm going to play it for you again. Listen for the of the drums and see if you can still hear it with the same clarity as before. So I'm going to play 4 bars in. Actually, I'm going to hit undo and undo so they swap back. Do not listen to these two because we know they're symmetrical. Listen to the clarity of the hi-hat. Here we go. That of the hi-hat in my original version, you can hear it. When I pan it opposite, it's masked. Mm-hmm. So this is, I want to pan the hi-hat to the left. Why? Because I want an air drum. That's great, dude. But now you have to listen of all the ripple effect that's going to happen. So this is the second concept. It's frequency masking and also dynamic masking fixed with spatial distribution. Think of the power of symmetry versus asymmetry. And you've heard me talk in these emotional terms a lot. And to me, personally, I believe that most humans find peace in balance. You know, when things are symmetrical, 1, 2, 1, 2, left and right are equal weight, people seem to relax. When things are lopsided and jarring, they seem to tense up. And I use this as a panning tool. We're going to focus really on the beat for these demonstrations. So here we have the drums. I am unmuting the kick samples, a lot of the snare samples as well. And here we have, all of these are percussion tracks that come, as you see, this tambora 1 comes in on the verse along with this tambora 2. Tambora is a Venezuelan percussion instrument that is only played in Christmas for some reason. So these two come in the verse, but then we have these congas that come in the pre-chorus. They didn't play before. And then during the chorus, we have everybody's joining in the party. What I want to achieve is this introduction of symmetry in the verse, because it's a stable, I'm telling you the story, I'm addressing you, says the vocals. So I have, if you see, tambora 1 is panned about 50% to the left, and the other tambora is about the same to the right. If you guys are listening, hopefully on great speakers or on great headphones, it's not fully wide, but it's symmetrical. In the pre-chorus, in comes the conga, which is 70 to the left. Mm-hmm. And then on the chorus, things really, really spread out with the entrance of the two high-frequency instruments, which we know the higher the frequency, the more directional it is. We really can get a lot of width with that. So with this in mind, listen to the emotional byproducts of symmetry versus asymmetry. Little beats coming in. And finally, which we already covered in a way, is how spatial limiting versus widening really is tied into how we feel a climax. You typically want a climax to be really wide and the opposite to be narrow. Here is an example of that. And that's the reason why I don't just go, great, you can be stereo 100 and 100.
Yeah, it's not a static thing. The imaging and the placement is not static. It becomes part of the dynamic of the scene change going from section to section. And then the other thing you just said, and maybe you could say a little bit more about this, is when you would choose to go really wide versus not really wide, and what elements in a very general way, would you always take the hi-hat and put it all the way out to the left, or the overheads and always go left and right? Or
we work with what we have been given, or we produce to achieve a certain thing that we want to feel. So if we are solely on a mixing position and we've been giving something like this, you would decide how far or not to pan things to tell your story. How you want to tell your story, I invite you to try these very things, right? You bump into technical issues sometimes, like for example, you have something that's labeled overhead left and overhead right. You pan them and it's quite mono. So then you have your single hi-hat track and you have to pan it all the way to the left to give the impression that it's a little bit on the left. Because what we're trying to do is all of these panning decisions don't live in a solo bubble. To me, they're a collage that helps tell the story. And we bump into whatever we bump into technically, you just need to make it happen. So let's say that you always have the crass panned right on the choruses and you put your tambourine on the left. But then on the bridge, the tambourine also plays and the drummer switches to the hi-hat. You're going to have to automate this thing out of the way or be cool with them masking.
Right.
Again, I just invite everybody to think of these concepts and try them out and see what results you get out of this.
Do you wait to use EQ until you have to? In other words, you're doing all these things and then EQ suddenly becomes the answer to solve that next or to achieve that next thing? Or do you just go in saying, slash and burn, let's EQ some stuff?
I need to listen to the stuff and make executive decisions, just like we did in our first conversation, and go and have your objectives and your goals. And now you know that you're going to have to just sculpt this a little and really change the nature out of this one sound to make it what you want. So let's jump in on how I tackle this potentially daunting forest of frequency distribution. The first thing that I try to strategize is how I'm going to divide the 4 big chunks that tonal balance lays out here for us. And I think it's a great way to start. What do you want to put in the lows? What do you want to put in the low mids, the high mids, and the highs? This mix is already done. So I'm going to hit play, and then we're going to solo each band and go and listen to what happens to land there. Again, this is not a mix in progress. This is a finished mix that we're deconstructing. So let's just do a little bit of analysis here. And we're going to actually focus on the chorus because it's the dense-est part. Here we go. Right? We hear the ballooning of the kick drum and some of that rumble of the bass. If we listen to the low mids, we actually hear more of the bass, the articulation of the bass, the body of the guitar, that kind of nasal quality of the vocals. But the keyboards aren't there as much. Let's go listen to the high mids. Some of the point of the guitar and the sparkle of the keys and some of that presence of the vocals. And then finally the highs. A lot of the sibilance of the vocals, the sizzle of everything else. Without this, we would have a pretty dull mix, but you hear that we don't hear a lot of tone and content, of course. Eventually, this is where we're going to start to push things, and as we deconstruct, we're going to hit bypass on EQs and see where the bass used to be, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's worth noting, especially when you highlight the low mid, that's where all the notes are, except for there's some notes, some tonal components that come from the low end, but that's really where the note values exist. And what I find interesting about that is that if you start doing radical EQs in that part of the sandbox, it's when you start to cause something to sound less tonal. Like it's harder to hear the note. Like you said, you can hear the bass better. That's because we hear those higher harmonics better that live in that range.
Yeah. And to your point of the fundamentals and the notes versus the other stuff is, to me, this is also a creative tool. As you'll see with the vocals, there's going to be some heavy mangling that we're going to do in a little bit. The first approach for me are to take care of the edges, the low lows, the high highs. So I survey the entire arrangement, and I produced this, so I can tell you right away. But if I wouldn't have produced this, I would just go and do solos until I go, hey, who here is responsible for the lowest of lows? Me? Are you providing them? Not really? Okay, good. But we're going to focus in on you. So to me, those two are these two kick drum samples right here. These are the two lows. So let's start there. If we listen to the song. We have that kick drum. And we have this kick drum, right? Let's just focus in on one kick drum. This is the EQ that's already there. Knowing that the responsibility for the low lows are these two, let's just listen to them without this EQ to just see what happens, just as an overall gut feeling. To be expected, right? So I always try to start my processing with the thought process of the first move is the most important fix move. So I always fix first and then sculpt and sculpt and sculpt till I polish at the very end. If we then start turning off these filters, let's run by why these filters are in place. My first filter is actually this flat high pass that is just bringing everything below 35 hertz. It's really filtering out. The reason for this is housekeeping. I know that I'm going to boost a lot of low end from this kick. If I hit play, we see that there's a ton of energy already really, really low. Knowing that if I go and boost this already, look what's going to happen to all of those adjacent frequencies. It's a lot of ballooning low end that, mastering engineers love. So this is my first fix-it move. Ballooning low end. And this tightens this move up. So this same concept is then applied to this other kick drum. So here, if I turn this off, and we turn this one back on, we know that these two kick drums are meant to be one sound. So together, and then off. So I'm taking care of the edge. I do want to make a quick note about this third filter that I bypassed on both of these. Let's leave them bypassed because in this order of fixing, because I made the mix, I can tell you that this is something that I had to do to unmask the bass. So mixing is this symbiotic. It's like what I remember when I used to live in San Francisco, people would say, that Golden Gate Bridge, they paint it, and when they're done, they start again. And when they're done, they start again. So for me, I'm not done with the kick. I'm putting the kick where it needs to be. And then as I uncover the snare, I'm always thinking, is the snare undoing some of the work that I did? And I have to always go back. So we'll revisit this kick drum in a moment. Actually, you know what? Let's go listen to the entire track without these two EQs.
Okay.
Here we go.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something, algo que yo quiero y se siente bello. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something, algo que yo quiero y se siente bello.
The other edge is the top end. And the top end really comes from these two percussion instruments in the chorus, the triangle again and the charrasca, right? It's these two. So similar thought process is that looks gross. And on the other one, that looks amazing. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the two instruments that I'm holding responsible for the top end. And I'm not letting them go until they give me the top end that I need. So if we go look at this, here, the same thought process as Y in order. So I'm going to go and quickly bypass all of these filters. So the first one is this big fix. If we listen, there's this low kind of hum that I don't need. So I'm just going to quickly take care of it. Then, as I continue listening, I can hear that there's this harsh, annoying tone to it that I don't really like. So here, I'm turning in, so help me remember, 5.2K minus 5. So here I just basically hunt around. If we put this in the middle, and there is the most annoying thing ever. So that is what I would then go. There we go. Right, and if memory serves, there we go. So there, again, fix it, fix, fix, fix. Then we move on to, hey, I need more top end. How much top end? Well, I listen to my reference mixes. It's almost like get a sip of that reference mix. Got it. That's the extension. That's the vibe. Go listen to mine. and add to taste. Now, of course, I could come here and do it for you, but you can envision this already. Until how much, it kind of matches the reference mix. Once this is done, I repeat operation for this next track, which is here's the before, and here's the after. Wildly different, right? Now, let's go listen to the track without these two EQ moves, and I'm going to pop them in just like we did before.
Tú me das something y esto me da something, algo que yo quiero y se siente bello. Tú me das something y esto me da something, y esta noche quiero repetir. Tú me das something.
You know, you say it's a lot, but when an instrument or an element has a very specific role to play,
Yeah.
then, and it's contributing a little bit of energy, it's not like this is competing with the vocal, it's just sort of supportive, then you shape it in whatever way you need to shape it
Yeah.
to get it to work, right?
And this is one of the reasons why I start with the edges, because they threaten other things less. Of course, we can get to genres like hip hop and maybe EDM, some metal, where there's a lot of information in the low end that is competing with each other, which we'll tackle with the bass here. But typically those edges are not as symbiotically threatened by other things. And they give me the edges. Let's move on to the low mids, which is to me, of course, your favorite fish, the bass.
Tú me das something y esto me da something.
Okay, so here the decision's made. Let's undo everything and start going for the reasoning as to why I did these. So, turning off. Let's listen together with all this stuff bypassed, and let's listen for issues. So again, the first thing is the fix. I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler. Do deep and down.
Wow,
Check it out.
mime.
Did you catch an issue there by any chance?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, let me tell you.
Okay.
The second phrase has a lot of ballooning low end. Knowing that the lowest of lows have been strategically saved for my kick, the bass is going to take the next sliver because I don't want them fighting. And this bass is pretty articulated, so the emphasis is yes on the fundamentals, but the harmonics on top of the fundamental. So my first move is to do some house cleaning. If before on the kick I had done a filter at 35, I'm doing one here at 66. Just this move, right, is going to, all the energy that goes below 66, it's going to curb down. So just with this filter, let's listen to how these two phrases now feel. Much more uniform.
Yep.
So then we go to the next phase of fixing, which is where this second filter comes in. And here, right at the same frequency, I'm basically creating a resonant peak that is somewhat narrow in its cue. So let's see how that feels. And now it sounds fatter and warmer and more controlled, and I'm not masking the kick drum. These other filters, this filter 3 is a fix-it move for the keyboards and guitar, which we'll leave. And these are embellishments. I want this bass to sound more flattering. I want more teeth out of them. So my thought process for any of these embellishing moves is I need to think symbiotically of what else is in the arrangement. Guitars, keyboards, etc., etc. So I know that in the mid-range, it's going to be a dogfight in there. So what I do is I envision in my head and I find it here. When I When I hear something that is flattering, I'm not tied to it. When I put the guitar, then I go recheck these to see if it's messing with the guitars, and then I move things to try to do this. But for now, I'm gonna activate these so that you can hear that bite and that character come out. And that progression was, oh, I have more note in there, more tone, but I want a little bit more bite in there. 5. Oh, but it's not bright enough. And then comes the shelf.
Right. So you have the bass sounding, great. You listen to the bass, think that sounds great. And then you bring the guitars in and you start to notice that the greatness that you thought you had isn't the greatness that you now have.
Yeah.
And you wonder whether you should blame it on the guitar or whether there's something more to do on the bass. Is there anything that leads you to make that decision about where to start, or is it just experimentation?
This is what I always think. Remember how I have this very deliberate order of unmuting foundation up, right? I'm done with the kick. The kick is sounding great, and then I'm going to go to the snare. When I unmute the snare, I never think, let me hear the snare. This is for emphasis. Are you guys there? When I unmute the snare, this is what I think. Snare, how are you ruining my kick drum? This is my first paranoid question. I kid you not. Every time I unmute something, my thought is, how is this ruining the rest of my work? And then I'm not to blame. I don't blame the snare for ruining my kick. I just have them have a conversation, and both of them have to give a little. And I do that the entire mix the entire time. So here we have our 2 kick drum filters, and filters 3 are bypassed. If we unmute the bass, do not listen to the bass. Listen to how the bass is ruining our kick, or our kick feeling of kick.
Oh.
We already did a bunch of EQing here on the bass, blah, 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 blah. But now I mute it. I'm done. No. Mute it. Take a break. Go get some coffee. And then unmute the bass and see what happens to the kick. So here we go. The clarity of the thump, that chest of the kick goes away. So let's play only the drums with the samples and kicks and stuff and the bass. I'm going to unmute the bass first. When I put it back in, do not listen to the bass. Listen to how the kick drum either stays the same or changes. Here we go. Kick drum gets a little bit thinner. That thump in the chest goes away a little. So here, this filter 3 that I had saved was a move that I did when I felt this. And here I go in neutron to this masking feature that I love, and I put on the bass. And if we go listen and watch, there's a lot of energy right there. And here, there's a lot of energy right there. I'm going to play it again, and then I'm going to turn these on, listen to the clarity of the bass and the kick together. Here we go. The bass gets a little bit clearer by doing this. And now let's go listen to the kick drum, because now this is the filter on the bass that does the same work on the other side. Mm-hmm. So here is the EQ for the bass clearing up the kick drum. To just exaggerate quickly, so this is, I'm making a cut. Look what happens if I boost it. So now that the low lows are in place and the low mids at least represented by the concept of the bass is there, let's move on to the next concept, which is the high mids. And let's exemplify that with the keyboards. Again, I made this production. I can tell you that in this chorus, the main two keyboards are these first two right here. If we listen to them, it's this. And then this. These make up the majority of the tone, the articulation. The other ones are more just a little bit of salt and pepper here and there. Start with this one. Listen to it without the EQ, and then I'll put the EQ in, and spoiler alert, you're seeing that we're starting to make way bigger moves here.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how we said the edges are less threatened by stuff? The fight for Middle Earth is a tougher battle. So this is what this keyboard sounds like, sounded like, and then sounds like again. Typically with keyboards, I mean, imagine a piano, right? Gong,
It's the whole orchestra.
totally. So
Yeah.
where are you going to put the vocals? I don't know. Tell the keyboard player not to play stuff in the middle. So either the arrangement helps or you have to start doing a lot of sculpting. Let's break it down. We have a first filter that 447. Why? Because there's a bunch of stuff below that I don't really need. Then this filter number 2 is fixing an issue of a little bit of bass, but also guitars that are going to come in a little bit. And then filter 3 is a review of what I was saying, that in the middle, things are so convoluted that we need to start finding slivers of frequency to have things poke out of. So that's 3. And then 4 and 5 are just overall sheen. If we bypass these, let's start bringing these in just to see what the sound turns into. Here we go. I'm going to do it again. Sorry to interrupt, but do not listen to the keyboard. Listen to the clarity of the bass.
What else you can hear, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so here we go. The bass got a lot clearer. Then we're going to leave filter 2 for the guitar in a moment, but let's add these, which are our character. Here we go. You hear the note pop out more. And you hear that it's not necessarily a flattering sound, but it's just the available little sliver that I've been given. And this, when you put in the guitar, et cetera, it tells you where. Like we did a minute ago, bump a lot. It masks everything. Oh, here seems to be a mix of flattering and available. And that's where it comes out. Sheen. More sheen. Little clarity on the bass. And that's what the thought process, the why behind such a weird curve. Now, just as a super quick next gesture on these keyboards is this one. Look at this gigantic cut. If we, again, I'm going to unmute this. Do not listen to this keyboard. Listen to how it's ruining the bass. Here we go. So the clarity of the bass is gone. The articulation of the bass is gone. So I found it, boom, brought it down. But let's try to quickly, as a gesture, do it together. So I'm going to leave this filter 2 there, and let's just try to find it with this filter number 3. So typically what I do is have not a super wide, but not a super narrow Q, and I start way off. So I know I can guesstimate that the area is going to be somewhere around there, but I start really off the mark. And I start sweeping. And my sweep is, this sounds awful. This sounds less awful. That sounds pretty good. That sounds not so good. That sounds bad. That sounds awful. So I find kind of my sweet spot. And that's on the instrument itself. Then I start thinking of the other instruments. Cool. So this is the sweet spot. But then within the sweet spot, oh, that covers the bass. Oh, that covers the vocal. That. And then I try to find the negotiation between both. Let's do that sweep. And what we're trying to do here is submerge the bass. Totally obliterate the bass, because that's, we know, the issue. Sounds bitey. The character, I guess, is okay, but the bass is still somewhat safe. The bass is still safe. It sounds harsh, but the bass is not bad. The bass is still okay. The bass is now coming in and out. The bass cleared up again. That's where it's threatening the bass the most. So then I put that to 0 and I start then tweaking to taste. And there the bass just, it's almost like I'm EQing the bass again. It's just coming back to life. One of the byproducts of this is obviously because I'm taking down so much energy, it's getting quiet.
Right, right.
So then I am compensating with bumping this up so that the overall sound changes, but the presence of loudness does not.
Mm-hmm.
These keys that also happen in the chorus, dun 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 da da dun, it's something that really needs to speak to you. You need to understand the notes, but then there are these pads. It's not really about the notes. It's about the
Texture.
Yeah, and it's about the excitement of the fizz. What are they doing? Here I'm going to mute them. I'm going to pop them back in. Of course, these have been mixed. So listen to what they add energetically to the party, and then we're going to see how they really sound. It's the energy of the fizz.
It's also about envelope. It creates a little motion.
Which is an interesting thing because that envelope I created. Look at this automation right here.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. Yep.
So these keyboards, back in their original natural state, right? When I found them out in the yard, this is what they actually sounded like. So I'm going to start with the after, and then I'm going to bypass so you can hear the before. And you see that they want to devour everything because pianos can do that. Synthesizers can do that. Heavy metal guitars, which I love. Also, what do you want to do when you grow up? Rah, devour everything. Awesome. You just need to. What's your role? I'm supposed to be the chugs. Okay, cool. Let's make you the best at. I just said it a minute ago, but that's why, again, we get these curves that look so weird because here's an added little concept. What's the role? It's a pad. It's a fizz. Do I need to hear notes? Not really. It's pressure. It's pressure up there. These, to me, these type of things, pads, oohs, ahs on vocals, Hammond B3s, string quartets that play long, elongated notes, I treat them as sonic spackle. Right? You see a wall and it has a bunch of holes in it and something is poking out. These sounds that have long envelopes, I use them to cover all of those little holes in there and make that wall of sound. These help a lot. So again, this is the reason for this weird curve. Here are the guitars. I'm going to unmute them. Don't listen to the guitars. Listen to the rest of the stuff. Here we go. So these guitars are they're kind of sing-alongy, but the ding dun dun is as well. And then we have vocals. Who the heck arranged this thing? And I know that I'm a maximalist. And I love to get me in trouble doing these type of things. So if we go take a look at the approach for this guitar, it's something actually very similar. We're taking care of the low end. We are taking care of the masking that is happening with the bass. We're giving this a little bit of character where in the sliver available, you might remember that we had higher slivers for the keyboard. So this is fitting a little bit lower. Let's do the after and the before as we have been doing. I hope that you guys are listening on great headphones or great monitors because mixing is about subtleties. And here, you know, if you're listening on laptop speakers, it might kind of sound the same. But for me, it's just clarity. It's just taking this veil off. Can you see through the veil? Yes, but the clarity is not quite there. And these moves add up. They multiply if you don't take care of these. So now that all of these instruments are in, we can take a step back and see how everything is doing, and we can go and revisit some of these moves that we've done if need be. Here, everything is in. We're doing great. If we listen, all the pieces seem to fit together. We're going to mute all of the EQs of only the keyboards and guitar.
Oh, okay.
Just so that all of this frequency sculpting and pushing that we've done, just to see what happens if we don't take care of it.
What I love about that demonstration you just gave is how you can clearly hear the masking and the influence of one instrument over another, or one aspect of an instrument. You know, there's a way of frequency soloing when you EQ to try to find trouble spots if you're pulling out resonances, but that's a very different a different kind of problem that you're looking for compared to what you just did. You were really thinking about the arrangement and that relationship.
You're making me think of this underlining thing that I always have in my head, which is, hey, there's a bunch of you here. We have to shoot this scene in this movie. What's your role? My role is, okay, cool. We're going to make you the best at that thing. Together, you make the scene. By yourself, you're going to look a little weird, but it's not about you. You know the band Evanescence?
Yes.
So Evanescence, when they were gigantic, Dave Fortman, their producer engineer, I was back in the day. I was assisting Dave on this project, and I was eagerly wanting to learn how to make metal or heavy music that clean, slick, and gigantic, right? So Dave goes away, and I'm doing my recall, and I look at the guitars, and Dave, if you're watching this, yes, I did this. I played the multi-track, and I bypassed the EQ on the guitars. And have you seen Back to the Future when Marty in the beginning goes and jumps back?
All right.
That's what happened to me when I undid the EQs on these guitars. The guitars just ballooned out. They were gigantic, super aggressive, and I just didn't understand. Well, they sound bigger when I undo the EQ. So I put the EQ back in already, and I just go, oh, okay. The next day I come and go, Dave, can I ask you a question? What's your thought process behind that EQ? And he says, well, the thing that eluded me for a really long time is that these guitars basically want to devour everything. So if you see, I start out with a low pass filter, and I basically start making the guitars more and more and more, because I have just white noise, right? Metal guitars. I start making until I hear the cymbals and the sibilance of the vocal, and then they start sounding horrible. And then I back out. And then I start going the other way. There's the kick drum, there's the bass, and then the guitars sound horrible. And then I back out. And then he basically spackled his way into that. Nobody's going to listen to the thing in undo.
Sure.
The whole arrangement together. So, the guitar with the bass, with the kick, together, it's a super impactful wall of sound. But things on their own are going to start to sound a little small. Now that we survived the instrumental version of this track, it's time to open up the protagonist, right? I think of instruments as one universe and vocals as another. Is this the way that it should be done? No, it's the way that I go about it. And I have to confess that I work a lot in genres where the vocals, the storytelling of the Bob Dylan telling me it's more of a jam, more of this is the message of the track. So with all due love to all of my singers, it's another sound. This particular one is, as we're keeping on with the chorus, is made up of 4 layers. So very quickly, I am going to play you the instrumental, unmute the leads, and then as you see here, I will unmute the high harmonies, the mid harmonies, and the low harmonies. Mm-hmm. And let's see what the arrangement sounds like, and then we will deconstruct the reasons for the EQ. So here we go. This is where we were. And then the lows. This particular arrangement has 4 layers of sounds that kind of together make up the vocal sound. If we reverse this by adding them, what I want to show you very quickly is how these in solo sound weird. Together, they sound like a vocal. Let's talk about objectives. The lead vocal to me is the most important one. So it's going to take the area of our hearing in which we're most sensitive. The mid-range, that 1K, 4K jumping at you. The high harmonies are going to be the sizzle, The mids are going to be a little bit of the body underneath the lead, and then the lows are meant to be this kind of stable low foundation. So let me play these for you, and I will solo and add these different layers so you can hear how these all add up.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
So this last put together of a collage to me sounds like a fat, present, engaging vocal.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
The lead on its own,
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
it's a lot of mid-range, not a lot of lows. It doesn't matter. Like I said before, it doesn't need to sound pretty. So if we go listen to the lead on its own, let me show you what I've done. As we deconstruct, the very first thing that you see here is a de-esser. The reason why I put a de-esser typically first is because the S, if we're thinking dynamically this way, right? Loud and quiet. The tone and the note is here. The high frequencies are louder. If I EQ something, it typically goes with. So by tucking the S in first, I can get to the tone a little bit quicker. Then we have some EQ. Then I have a compressor that is mildly doing a little bit. Then I added a saturator to excite things even more. And then I added another EQ to compensate. Let's turn all of these off and let's start building this vocal from scratch. So if we listen.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
Let's listen to what the de-esser is actually doing by hitting listen. So I'm messing with the parameters so that I just get that little snippet, right? We could.
Yes, tú me das something.
So to taste, right until I get those S's. Once that's done, then I move on to my EQ. Here, pretty much the same logic and methodology that we covered already for the bass, for the keyboards. You know, I'm doing some house cleaning. Then I had a little bit of resonance in the lows that I ducked out. I had a little more resonance that when I put maybe the other vocals in, I had to go and clean a little bit of space for the other vocals coming in. A little bit of character and that air up there sheen. As we know, everything is symbiotic, so some of these moves, for example, 3 and filters 2, are going to make more sense with the other vocals, but let's just quickly go in order and see how the frequency footprint of these vocals gets constructed. So here we go.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
It's a little strange that we're showing this in solo, but the gesture is we have a ballpark direction we're going towards, right? If we move on, there's a compressor, which I'm going to skip over for now. It's just keeping things a little bit more uniform and not quite changing the tonal character of it too much. This is adding a lot. So this saturation, especially for this lead vocal, I want the lead vocal to just be right in your face. And as I was playing with this saturator, once I turned it on, the fantastical people at iZotope have all of these wonderful flavors to choose from. And I started getting, what's the word? Happy. And just going really exaggerated with a lot of these. And I found tape with 84% started giving the vocal this feeling that gave it an urgency that was kind of striking and super cool. This is obviously the result of a lot of exploration, but just listen to that character and how it really changes the vocal tone, which is totally fine by me.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
It's brighter, but it also has more low end. And it has this kind of little sizzle to it that I really, really like. So that's the reason why I put this other EQ to compensate for the tonal character. I'm going to put the saturator on and then put this on.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
Moving to the other vocals, let's just take a very quick look at what's happening here. On these higher vocals, we know that the sheen comes from these. So let's listen with and without.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something.
Are you listening to how I am just contorting the heck out of this sound to make it conform to the thing I need it to be? I invite anybody who goes, oh, but how could I ever bring it down more than 10 dB? Go for it. Hard. Yes, listen for, are these moves creating other issues for you? Are you distorting something? Are you creating some weird hum, buzz, hiss, whatever? But if not, nobody that listens to your work on Spotify is going to go, did that person really take it down minus 12 dB on? So we know that these vocals need to just be fizzy and bright, and here they are. If we now go to these mid vocals, this is what we got. So I'll play you the after and then the before.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
The one thing that I just want to pause for a moment is this little filter here. So number 2, it's kind of a weird little bump. This, what I found, is kind of similar to the bass. I'm rolling off a lot of low end. It feels thin. This little bump is just putting a little bit of butter. Did I just say putting a little bit of butter? It's putting in a little bit of fat, a little bit of butter that we need. I always think of food when I'm
I've
making.
noticed that about you, yes.
You know, I'm always thinking of, I just made some rice. What does this need? It needs fat. It needs either a butter or a coconut oil or some fatty content. Sometimes this little bit of low end just provides that little bit of needed fat that makes it sound not thin. So let's check it out with and without.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
And it's emphasizing this resonance that already happens there, and it's just bringing it to the front a little.
And it is the fundamental of the note of most of that line. I mean, you can actually see it.
This one, the last one, is an interesting one because what is its role?
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das.
It's this kind of sensual, whispery support at the bottom, but it doesn't really, even though he's singing really low, if I had the low end that he gave it, it's probably just going to destroy the clarity of everything else. So you see this move is really radical. I hope that you guys already can guesstimate what's happening here. A lot of house cleaning, and this little bump is the one sliver that I had available for these vocals to stick out. This is the after and the before.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
By itself, sounds kind of weird. It doesn't matter by itself. If we go and put in all of the vocals, and let's go listen to all of the vocals after, and then I'm going to bypass them all together to see what these do. So here we go.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
Right? Here it is again with the whole track.
Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something. Tú me das something, yes, tú me das something.
It's balanced so much better that way.
And yet in solo, it sounds kind of strange. You know, if you would bring the singer here and go, listen to what I've done to your lead vocal. All of the things that we've covered, to me, I think a lot of filmmaking, you know, if you go look at a movie and you get suspended in the disbelief of watching a film, what really goes into making a film? Oh, the light needs to be here, and then the editing goes there, and the color correction, and all this stuff. And people just go, I'm in love. Yeah, but to get you to feel that stuff, you need to do a lot of, dare I say, unnatural stuff because of the medium.
You want to play us out?
I think we deserve it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cuando estoy tan cerquita de ti, algo por dentro se mueve lento. Si me preguntas qué te puedo decir, no me concentro con tu movimiento. Vuelo tan alto que me lleva el viento y anhelo tus besos. Soplas el fuego que llama este encuentro, lo que ya no puedo resistir. Tú me das something y esto me da something, algo que yo quiero y se siente bello. Tú me das something y esto me da something, y esta noche quiero repetir. Tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, oh, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, oh, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, tú me das, oh, tú me das, tú me das, y yo te doy.
These are just concepts. They're concepts that are applicable to classical music, to ska and polka. I've been working on these for myself as a professional for many years, but this approach has also been informed and improved by the years of teaching at Berklee, where I'm seeing people, what are the usual difficulties here? And it has worked.